Hi, my name is Dan. I'm Executive Director of Crossing Borders, and when we started Crossing Borders, we knew that this work could get us into a bit of danger. Mike moved out to China in 2003, and we knew that it was very dangerous for him to be there. And at that time, we didn't have the technologies that we do today to make it a little bit safer. When I signed up too, I also realized that I could be getting myself into some trouble, but to be honest, I thought it'd probably be okay. I wasn't living out in China. I wasn't, in the face of danger all the time. But, every time I stepped on that flight from Chicago to China, I knew that something could happen. Looking back, it wasn't this grand pronouncement of, yes, I will do this. Despite the risks, I'm going to go. Hurrah. It wasn't like that for me at all. It was a lot of small, little steps of faith. And I wanted to tell you about an incident that happened a little over 10 years ago that sort of exemplifies this. I was in China. We were thinking about investing in some land that was in China, but right on the border for North Korea. I think the thinking was maybe we could create some sort of safe haven for the refugees to come out because there were other lands that were filled with human traffickers. But I was checking out this plot of farmland. My friend, who's a farmer out here, and he's also a donor, told me, hey, get a sample of that soil and I'll do a test and we could see how productive that soil is. And so I did that, and as I was gathering soil from the ground, I looked up and I found myself surrounded by, I think, 8 Chinese soldiers holding their guns and pointing them at me very scarily. Yeah, and I was frightened. And they asked me a bunch of questions, and I think I answered them okay, because we rehearsed them. And then they said, well, let me check the car that you came in. Well, the problem was I was checking out of my hotel that day, and I didn't have time to put my luggage somewhere else, and this included my laptop, which contained just about every bit of Crossing Borders information that was ever out there, including the names and locations of all of the refugees that we were helping and have helped historically. It was a big problem. And it was at that point I thought, I'm gonna go to jail for at least a few weeks. Our work in China is over. They told me to open my laptop. I was so scared. And I prayed. It was the only thing I could do. I remember it was a very cloudy day that day, and I looked up to the sky. It was like internally I was screaming to God for help. And so they told me, open your photos. Do you have any photos on there? In the iPhoto app were like a few pictures of my adorable kids, and he could see that. And he closed the computer and gave it right back to me. I was told that, in China, they would at least take a copy of my hard drive for further inspection, but they didn't. Looking back, I realized that God was there with me. It was an incredibly dangerous situation, and God helped me by the skin of my teeth. And it reminds me of the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They simply obeyed God. That's all they did, right? They obeyed the Lord, and they said that they would not bow down to the gold idol. If they do get sent into the fire, as was threatened, God would deliver them. But even if God didn't deliver them, they're still not going to do it. And in a very small way, that's what happened to me. It wasn't this decision that I will go to jail for CB. Just like for these Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they weren't deciding to go into the fire, but if the consequences of their faith led them to the fire, then so be it. I think that's an important distinction. And when they were sent in the fire, as it says in Daniel 3, there were actually 4 people there in the fire. And God, in his goodness and his grace, was with them as they went through this horrible thing. And I don't know where you are at today. You might be going through some fire that you feel like is undeserved just because of your faith, just because I've been obedient. And you know, God doesn't promise that we would be spared of the fire. Sometimes we are. But what he promises us is that he will be there with us. I want to encourage you today, and I want to remind you of that God will be with you. He was there for me, and not just that time, but numerous times. That's what this series is about. It's about God being there for us, and he will be there for you. I just pray a prayer of blessing upon each of you watching, and each of our donors, and each of the people who are participating and supporting this work somehow, that God will be with you wherever you go, even in the fire.